Now, it's time for the Anchormen podcast with Matt Gates and Dan Ball.
Welcome back to the Anchormen Show. I'm Matt Gates, host of the Matt Gates Show, every night, 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 Pacific on One American News. We're so excited. Our channel is now being carried on Spectrum, the #1 cable provider in the entire country, talking to a lot of folks about the great things going on in the country. And this program, the Anchormen podcast, gives us a chance to really address the human condition on a weekly basis. We also distribute it to my entire online universe, whether that's on YouTube, Rumble, Apple, or X. And we have had all kind of folks from all kind of walks of life on. We've had professional prize fighters, professional comedians. We had someone who was a member of the homeless community here in California, policy experts, political candidates. And our goal is really to have better understanding of what's going on here in our country, with humanity, and the world. And one of the subjects that we've really been following closely on our daily program is the plight of white farmers in South Africa. There has been a real tinge of genocide to the governmental policies in South Africa. And with President Trump issuing executive orders punishing South Africa for some of their conduct, we really wanted the chance to do a deep dive into why this is happening and what it possibly says about other racial strife that we see emerging in other parts of the world. And so we'll get to that with an expert with a plan in just a moment. But first, to thank the outstanding sponsors who make this program possible. All Family Pharmacy, the place you go if you're feeling tired, foggy, or just low on energy. This might be more than stress. It could be your cells running low on fuel. That's why more and more folks are turning to NAD Plus and Methylene Blue. As we get older, our cells slow down, but that doesn't mean you have to. These products are helping people boost their energy, clear out brain fog, and stay sharp. Now you can get both NAD Plus and Methylene Blue from All Family Pharmacy. It's my go-to pharmacy. It's the one I've been telling you about. They make things easy. You get what you need without the usual runaround. It ships fast, doesn't require insurance, and the doctor's prescription is included. It's where I go for essentials like ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, antibiotics, vitamins, and more. All online, delivered right to your door. Check out allfamilypharmacy.com/Matt. Use code MATT10 to save 10%. Again, that's allfamilypharmacy.com/Matt. Code MATT10 for 10% off. Stay sharp, stay strong, stay free. And I am joined this week, as always, by my good friend and on-again, off-again employee. He was the founding producer of Steve Bannon's War Room. Now he's a producer on The Matt Gates Show, worked on Capitol Hill in my office and in the office of George Santos. Vish Burra, thank you for being here. And one of our regular guests on The Matt Gates Show, but someone we've really been following, Ernst Roets. And Ernst is an advocate for the Afrikaner community in South Africa, and he is recently out with a plan to create self-determination for folks in South Africa to fight back against these genocidal impulses that we have been observing. And so we're going to get into all of that, Ernst. I can't wait to really get to the core of this issue. But Vish, first, when really the New York Young Republican Club started talking about the challenges in South Africa well before this was the subject of Oval Office meetings or executive orders. How did the club that you were in the leadership of come to this issue and think about it?
Well, honestly, we could really thank Ernst here for kind of helping initiate that. We have a very robust international committee at the club that's led by Nathan Berger. He was the former vice president. He's still part of the leadership there at the club. But we've always looked to create partnerships and pipelines overseas because the whole idea is that, people talk about the MAGA movement being populist or isolationist or all these other words, isms that, kind of implies that we want to be alone in this world. And that's far from the truth. We went out there with the kind of objective to create global connections with people of like mind who have similar sort of nationalistic views and pride in their own nations. And one of those pipelines was constructed by that international committee and Ernst. And the funny thing is, we did, I think, our first event with Ernst back in 2022. And before the event happened, we were marketing it. And I had made my way down to NatCon 2022 down in Miami. And at NatCon 2022, I was going through the crowd and I saw this handsome gentleman there, and I recognized him from our promotional materials. And I was like, I'm pretty sure we're having an event about South Africa with this guy in just a couple of weeks at the New York Young Republican Club. So I went over, introduced myself to him, and we hit it off as friends. And we had the event just 2 weeks after that. And honestly, the thing is that this South Africa issue is really, there's a tangential line between where America is going and what South Africa and the Afrikaners have already been through, and the kind of reactions and solutions that they've developed in response to this kind of racialized politics and balkanized politics that we're going through right now in America. And so we wanted to be able to bring up those pipelines, create that conversation and dialogue, and also provide ideas on how they can fight back in their home country while they provide us ideas on how we can fight back here.
Look at the good that the New York Young Republican Club is doing for the movement. Because of your great connections through the club, you've been able to connect our entire audience to Ernst and his message. So Ernst, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to a conference in Miami with Vishbura.
Thank you. So, yes, well, I'm an Afrikaner and I grew up in South Africa. I live in South Africa. I live in Pretoria. I grew up in the north in South Africa, not far from the Zimbabwean border. And so I grew up with that reality, with the farm invasions and all of that, and the crashing of the Zimbabwean economy, just not far from we lived. And also the reality of the farm murders. I lived in an agricultural community, so living in an agricultural community in South Africa, people who are attacked, and you knew people who have been murdered. And it's the same with me. Friends who went to school with me who've been murdered, and it's really something. And so that sort of just naturally pushed me into doing what I'm doing today. And it's through that, and I've been involved with a variety of organizations, including back then I was with AfriForum, which is a civil rights group in South Africa that does fantastic work. And we started, reaching out to other communities and reaching out to the rest of the world. I met the guys of the club at CPAC in Hungary. I remember the first guy from the club I met was Nathan, in fact, who you just mentioned. And then Gavin, and we had a great conversation leading up to an invitation to speak at the club. And I think that was, like you said, the Miami conference was shortly before the event. So I figured let's go a bit earlier.
Well, sure. I'm sure it was a compelling message you had to share, especially when you're talking about growing up and losing friends you describe them as murders.
Yeah.
How old were you when you first had to encounter that dynamic of a friend or someone you knew about being killed, and what was that like?
Well, the first that I remember was I believe it was in 1994 when the ANC took power, and we had recently moved to this agricultural community, and someone we knew who was quite close to us, someone who was working with my mother, his wife was kidnapped and raped. And I was, 10 years old, 9 or 10 years old at the time, and I didn't really know what this means. And that was my first real experience with this. And then the people who lived next to us or across the street from us in this town where we grew up, I lived in the town for some time and some time on the farm, was family of victims of a very well-known murder in South Africa in 1985. It was two families who were killed by a landmine that was planted by the ANC back before.
Who's that planted the landmine?
The ANC is the party that's running South Africa today, the ruling party in South Africa. They took responsibility for it, and that's because they had a formal position adopted in 1985 that they regard farmers, and especially white farmers, as legitimate target, not as soft targets. And so and they deliberately said so, including their wives and their children. And so they started targeting farmers. And one of the ways in which they did that back then, they don't do it today anymore, was through landmines. And so this was a very well-known case of the farmer actually survived, but his children were killed and his wife was killed in this landmine accident. And we grew up next to them and sort of learning about this from their perspective. And then the other stories is just people who sort of in the community in which we lived who've been attacked on farms. And one case that was particularly vivid was one Sunday we were in church and someone came running in And there's an elderly couple in our church. And I was young, if memory recalls, I think the lady stayed at home and the husband came to church, and then they murdered her on the Sunday during the congregation or the ceremony. They tied her up next to a tree, and I believe she was beaten with a hammer, and eventually her throat was slit. And then for some time we lived on a farm, and it's really something growing up with this sort of knowledge as a child. And I remember sleeping on the farm, next to the window, and a twig or something would fall from the tree, and your first instinct is someone came to murder me, or the power would go off, and your first instinct is not that there's some strange reason, maybe some cable got wet or something. Your first instinct is they're here, they're going to come and kill us. So you sort of growing up with that sort of really shapes you in a particular way.
Violence is always something that would shape anyone, however they encounter it. But it would seem to be different if you were growing up believing that violence was somehow inspired by, shaped by your own government. I mean, even when people grow up in deeply violent places, if they think that the cops will come, there's hope.
Yes.
How should Americans think about kind of where the violence starts and where the government begins in South Africa in a lot of these instances?
So my book, Kill the Boer, that was published a few years ago, it's called Kill the Boer, and the subheading is Government Complicity in South Africa's Brutal Farm Murders. And we debated whether that's the appropriate term, the word complicity, and I felt strongly that it is, because firstly, there are some reported cases of government officials involved, like members of the police.
Directly involved in the killing.
Yeah. Now, maybe that could be isolated cases. In most of the cases, we don't have that detail, but there are such examples. But what is more concerning is the political climate that has been created in South Africa, where if you go out and you kill a farmer, it's not a bad thing, or it's not as condemnable when the victim is someone else. And this continued chanting of kill the Boer, kill the farmer, while the farmers are being killed, and then the politicians, including the president, would either deny that the farm murders are happening, or they would try to justify it in some way by saying that, well, the problem is actually the farmers, and if they just behaved better, then maybe we wouldn't kill them.
Well, wait, that's exactly what happened. During this Oval Office discussion where President Trump really gave a lot of voice to the concerns you've been expressing, the very thing you said happened. There was a denial. There was, this isn't the policy of the government. These things aren't happening. Let's take a listen.
We have hundreds of people, thousands of people trying to come into our country because they feel they're going to be killed and their land is going to be confiscated. And then when they take the land, they kill the white farmer. And when they kill the white farmer, nothing happens to them. The farmers are not black. And the people that are being killed in large numbers, and you saw all those grave sites, and those are people that loved ones going, I guess on a Sunday morning, they told me, to pay respect to their loved ones that were killed. Their heads chopped off. They died violently.
Is the president on point?
The president of which president?
Our president, the president you just
no, he was definitely on point. And I can say that even though there was this very fierce reaction against President Trump, because there are a lot of people, especially in America, but also in South Africa, who like to believe if President Trump says A, then B has to be the truth. So there were
we see that condition arise sometimes here, as well. But what I'm seeing described, it would almost inspire within the farmers that exist in South Africa a hatred, a racism, a worldview that would not be compatible with continuing to be under the same government and in the same country together, right? I mean, are we seeing a situation arise where what people have faced have caused like the farmers to be inherently racist when they see anyone approaching, like you say, waiting for the twig to fall in the middle of the night? What do you think?
Well, I wanted to point that out. It's because in that first event that Ernst did with the New York Young Republicans, one part that really stood out to me was that, Afrikaners can be mad or even be filled with rage about what's going on with these people. But another reaction that they had was that they relied on their innovation and ingenuity to respond to it, right? And we talk about today that there's this kind of parallel economy kind of developing where things are like, people are saying, you can't, we're going to cancel you off this platform, cancel you off this. If you want to go build your own Facebook, go build it, but then we blow you off the Amazon servers, right? But the South Africans actually had an incredible response to this. And Ernst, maybe you can talk about that, about the systems that you had to build in response to that, the normalization of racial violence and hatred against the farmers of South Africa.
Yes, so from an Afrikaner perspective, when the political transition happened in South Africa, the government used to be very much pro-Afrikaner, and then overnight it shifted, and then it became very openly antagonistic.
Why? Why the change?
Well, it was the political transition when the ANC took power in 1994, when Nelson Mandela became the president. And it was sort of mellow initially with all the talk of reconciliation and a rainbow nation. And then the ANC started showing its true colors, which has been there since before the transition. I mentioned the killing of the farmers, the landmines and so forth. And then it really shakes you up into your foundations when the Afrikaners, I think to our detriment, became very dependent on the state during the 1980s and so forth. And then suddenly the state became our single biggest existential threat. And so then we quickly discovered that we cannot rely on the state. I was in an armed robbery a few years ago in South Africa where someone was killed in front of my family, actually. And I actually, while we were sort of hiding from the robbers, I tried calling the police and they didn't even answer their phone. Then I called private security and I called what we call community security. It's like neighborhood watches, and they responded immediately and they were there within 5 minutes. So you can't depend on the government, and so you also can't outvote them because South Africa is very big. It's like it's the equivalent of a small state in the US, Louisiana or something, trying to outvote the national ballot.
No, yeah, we understand the notion that there are times when you are not going to be beyond the political power of an ethnic minority in the country. That happens.
Yeah. And so the only way, so firstly, we should talk, you mentioned this, the political system needs to change. But other than that, within the existing circumstances at the moment, the only way forward is for us to sort of rediscover an ancient truth, which is that a nation saves itself. Don't wait for the government to fix your problems, fix them yourself. And so if it's dangerous in your area and the police aren't there, you should keep calling them and you should keep applying pressure. But at the end of the day, just do something about it yourself. Get armed, learn how to use a firearm, get radios, start driving patrols in your areas. And then we also started establishing a variety of institutions in South Africa to look after our community. And so the Afrikaners have been accused of developing a parallel state through sort of private initiatives, just developing our own schools, private schools, and so forth. And it goes for basically every sphere, basically everything that the government is supposed to be doing. We have just de facto taken over just through doing it ourselves, establishing our own network, our own private security, our own education systems, our own cultural institutions, and so forth. You can go down the list.
And what have been the societal and cultural ramifications of establishing those assets?
Well, it's interesting if you look at some of the great atrocities of the last century. There are some recurring themes or threads, which is that it's usually, or in most of these cases, almost all of these cases, in fact, a minority that are being targeted that is easily identifiable and that is economically better off than the majority. That was the case. Obviously, we saw that in Germany, we saw that in Europe, we saw that in many of these atrocities, in whether it's Yugoslavia, the Tutsis in Rwanda. And that's the problem that we have, is in as far as we are successful, we are being targeted because of that. Because the Marxist line is, if you are successful, that's because you stole something from someone or you have exploited someone. And if you are poor, it's because someone stole something from you. And now they blend that in South Africa with race nationalism. So then the line is more or less that if you are being poor and being black is the same thing, and being rich and being white is the same thing. And there are no poor white people, which of course is a lie, and there are no rich black people. And so
also a lie,
which is also a lie. Especially the politically connected elites are incredibly wealthy. And so then we would be targeted as a result of that. So in as far as we are successful or we remain successful, the argument is, so that's privilege, and therefore we need to take more extreme measures to destroy the privilege that you have.
We have heard that argument made in this country a time or two.
Yeah.
The the diagnosis of where things are now. Help me understand, is it getting better? Is it getting worse? Are we in a stasis where things are the same? Is there really a community left to be saved? Have so many Afrikaners left under this pressure that we're really not able to constitute a society out of this?
So the situation in South Africa is definitely getting worse in terms of the friction, the political climate, the economy, virtually every indicator, crime levels, everything, trust in the government. All of those are getting worse. What is getting better is, I would say, two things. There might be more, but two things especially stand out. One is the resolve of the Afrikaner people to find a future in South Africa. So many have left the country.
How many are there?
2.7 million.
Okay.
Yeah, so many have left, and many will continue to leave. We've seen
2.7 million still there. Does that count the diaspora?
No, that's without the diaspora. So it could be closer to 5 million. If you include the diaspora. So especially with this talk of refugee status and so forth, that, by the way, has helped to put a lot of international focus on South Africa. So the one,
but it's not what you want. I mean, exactly. We're going to get to the policy prescriptions, but like, I don't want anyone watching this discussion to say, well, like the answer is we have to allow these people to escape this circumstance. Yeah. You have a very different vision than that. But the need for that escape is driven by the politics of an individual named Malema, Julius Malema.
Yeah.
And I think we've got a clip of some of his political activity. Let's go ahead and roll that.
Shoot to kill. Hamaza. Kill the Boer. The farmer. Kill the Boer. The farmer. Brr, pa. Pa. Brr, pa. Pa.
So who is that and what is he doing?
So that is Julius Malema. He used to be the president of the Youth League of the ANC, which is the governing party in South Africa. He left the governing party because of internal faction fighting, not because of policy differences. And then he started his own movement, which is ironically called the Economic Freedom Fighters, although they believe economic freedom lies through race-based redistribution and not through production. And he's chanting a chant that became very well known in South Africa called Kill the Boer, Kill the Farmer. The word Boer is more or less a synonym for Afrikaner. Especially historically, we were known as the Boers, like during the Anglo-Boer War. And then, of course, kill the Boer, kill the farmer. In Afrikaans, the word Boer literally translates to being to the word farmer. And he's chanting this at a political rally after making a speech, and the speeches would always be along the lines of, this is a direct quote from him, all white people are criminals and should be treated as such. And we need to slit the throat of whiteness. And he would say things like, if you see a beautiful piece of land, go and take it, it's yours. And he would make all these the other comment he made was I'm not calling for the slaughter of white people, at least for now. And then he explained later that he might one day do that. And then after making these speeches, he would then burst into this chant, kill the Boer, kill the farmer, impersonating, making the sounds of, imitating the sounds of a machine gun or a firearm, and then, making these gestures. And what is quite really concerning or alarming is that it's not a metaphor. So people in the media would say, well, that's just a metaphor. It's just commemorating the struggle and commemorating the revolution. But the farmers are literally being killed. And they are literally being killed while he's chanting, go out and kill them. And we've seen that slogan used during some of these farm attacks. In the worst case, we know of two elderly women who was a mother and a daughter were attacked on a farm and tortured. And the victims then used their blood to write the words "Kill the Boer" on the wall, the farmhouse wall. And there are other
sounds like they knew the chant.
Exactly, they know the chant. And there has been reported cases of murderers testifying that they were influenced by this chant. And then people in the media, also the South African courts, the justice system, and the South African government, including the president, would keep defending it, would keep saying that there's nothing wrong with this chant.
Vish, what scares us the most? That Malema is at least tangentially a part of the political coalition of the majority government, or that he is able to inspire that type of a crowd and this type of violent conduct?
Well, I mean, all aspects of that is just scary as hell. The fact that this guy's already managed to be part of a governing coalition, and the fact that he has all this leeway to be able to say stuff like that. But also the thing is that especially in our world of this globalized media and content, being globalized, this guy is not just inspiring people in South Africa, but all over the world to pursue this kind of race-based redistributivism and race-based grievance on, what people, should believe that they deserve. That, like you said, that it's become synonymous, that poor and black mean the same thing and rich and white mean the same thing. We see that here everywhere, right? We see that in America. We see that in Western European countries. We even see that dynamic being applied to Israel as a white colonial project, right? And that's why Palestinians are dealing with the problems that they're dealing with. So you see this being solidified and distributed everywhere across Earth. But, the funny part about that, and Ernst, maybe you can speak to this and clarify it for our audience, is that the grievance is also a revision of history itself, right? In that the Boer is actually in certain ways indigenous to South Africa, that they were there before the demographic groups that Malema and a lot of these groups that make up the ANC, and their presence in South Africa, that the Boers came before them, right? Can you kind of break that down for us?
Yeah, so I think there are two clarifications. One, you're absolutely right to talk about Malema being part of this coalition. I know some people would say that's not true, and I would like to explain why it is true. The reason why people would say it's not true is because he's not part of what we have in South Africa today as a government of national unity that includes several of the opposition parties. He's not part of that. But he is part of what you might call the political elite in South Africa, because it's his party, him as an individual and his party are in many ways the tail wagging the dog. They are ideologically aligned with the ruling party, and they are putting forth, they want to prove that they are the more radical party. So they are.
He sounds like the Steve Bannon of South Africa.
I'm sure Steve will love that clip.
Yeah. Just in terms of
pushing the Overton window.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
So they are, his party and him as a person are the ones who've been pushing this expropriation of private property and so forth. And then the government or the ruling party would then follow suit and vote their policies into power. But so that's the thing about the history is. I'm fascinated by American history also and the founding fathers. And if you read the Federalist Papers, John Jay writes in Federalist number 2 about why America could be united, because it shares a history, it shares a culture, it speaks the same language, and there are many things on which Americans in the different states agree, which means that there could be a federation. South Africa doesn't have that. It doesn't have a shared conception of history. It doesn't have a shared culture, and it doesn't have a shared language. And it doesn't have a shared philosophy. And so the Boers have been in South Africa. So my family, we've worked it out. The roots sort of from whom I descend directly he was just a little bit older than George Washington when he moved to South Africa from Europe. So my personal family has been in South Africa since before the Declaration of Independence. And as a people, we've been for more than a century since before that. So we've been in that country for hundreds of years, almost 400 years, and we became a unique people there. We're not Dutch, we're not Germans, we're not French. We even named ourselves after the continent. We are the Afrikaners. We developed our own language, we have a unique culture, we have a rich treasure chest of literature and philosophy and arts and everything, and all of that we developed there, which is why we want a solution in South Africa.
Say something in Afrikaner for us.
Wat wil jy moet ek sê? What do you want me to say?
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
It sounded more European than African to me.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if I'd sell the language as the leadoff hitter. But it is important to know the history. I doubt that you'll be recognized by any indigenous peoples' advocacy groups.
Yeah.
answer this question, and I ask it rhetorically. You obviously know I care. I've been covering it on my program. But why should anyone in America care about any of this?
So I think, firstly, the most important reason is just the basic fundamental principles of justice and fairness, and it really is an atrocity.
Those are violated everywhere. We can't care about everywhere that the principles of justice.
Yeah, so it is an injustice. But I think if the question is what is sort of the American interest perspective,
Yeah.
I think firstly what Vish mentioned already is that America should know that South Africa is not behind but ahead, and what's happening in South Africa today could very well be the future of America if people in America don't learn from what's happening in South Africa. There are also some practical reasons, more practical reasons, such as the fact that the South African government is working very hard against American interest and Western interest in the international arena through BRICS and so forth. Also because the Afrikaners are a Western community. We're a pro-American, we're a pro-Western nation that lives in South Africa that is being persecuted for precisely that reason. And then also, I think there's also a strong American interest angle in the fact that if South Africa collapses, it will certainly destabilize Africa. Because what's happening at the moment, South Africa is a strong economy for now, and people are actually immigrating south towards the south of Africa. And if that collapses, the immigration will go in the other direction, and it will open the door for China and adversaries of the US to step in and strengthen its grip on the African continent. But I would say, for me, the most important of that is we're a Western nation. We're the last Western outpost on the African continent. And we're indigenous. We're not British people living in South Africa. And we are friends of America. We're friends of Europe. We're friends of the West. We are Westerners. And that's the reason why we are targeted. And what we also see happening recently, for which the fact that I met the club at Budapest, in Budapest is an example of this, that I'm very happy to see that in the Western world or the conservative movement, that people are sort of finding each other and recognizing that even though we have unique problems and threats, we are all Westerners and we are being targeted because of that fact. And there's this pursuit to destroy Western civilization, and we should support each other where that is under threat.
Well, I buy it, but I've heard a very similar argument expressed when I don't buy it, right? I mean, that sounds a lot like something Vladimir Zelensky could have said. Like, I am a Westerner. I am for Western civilization. You should care about me. We were here. Somebody else started picking on us. Send your guns and your weapons. Are you buying the unique societal case that Ernst made as unique to America's interests?
Yes, but that's what Ernst is saying is not what Zelensky is saying. He's not saying send me your weapons, send me your money, send me everything you got. In fact, that they're going out of their way to build their own.
Though they take it.
Of course, sure they take it, but they're not asking, right?
Ernst, would you take the HIMARS if we offered them? I'm guessing the answer
Well, we are
is yes.
actually a well-armed nation.
What's the strongest weaponry you have?
Well, no, it's firearms. It's not. We don't have artillery and things like that.
Yeah, Zelensky would never settle for that.
But the point being that actually the mentality that attracts me to the Afrikaner and their plight is that they didn't wait for anyone to come save them, right? They're doing their best to take matters into their own hands and address these problems head on, whether that's addressing them directly or addressing them in a parallel way, creating their own systems, their own institutions. That, I think, is very admirable, very Western, very American, quite frankly. And so I think, obviously, there is this support where, allowing refugees from South Africa, white refugees from South Africa coming here, that allows to put some pressure on the South African government, right? And those kinds of tactics are
that was just
welcome.
A showcase. That was just a
right,
showcase.
but I think that is more welcome than it's like I don't think we're going to be invading Pretoria anytime soon.
Sounds like they've already been invaded. Is kind of the problem. Yeah, no, but you are asking for international recognition, and tell us what that looks like in the most productive lens.
So we have this philosophy, and it's sort of historically part of our culture. This slogan that says "A nation saves itself," or in Afrikaans it would be "A volk red homself."
Work in as much Afrikaner language from this point forward as you feel necessary.
And so we don't want other countries to save us. We don't want America to, take...
What do you want?
What we want is... The first thing is very easy, and it's It's recognition that our pursuit is a legitimate pursuit. And that
you aren't some radical separatist terrorist group that the South African government is portraying you to be.
Exactly that. And also, I mean, we've been vilified for decades now, and that's why we are so grateful for the remarks by President Trump and work that people like you're doing and what the club is doing, the Young Republicans Club, is recognizing that there's something worth talking about. Because for decades we were the apartheid guys, and we're just sort of 2 degrees away from Nazis. And so we want recognition that what we are working for is legitimate. And I also think with the tariffs and the interest that the president has in South Africa, I really think the United States could, through very little effort, contribute to a more sustainable situation in South Africa.
Anytime someone says contribute to a more sustainable situation, our wallets get lighter. So tell us, be as granular as you feel is necessary, but tell us what the heck that means.
Okay. So you mean what would more sustainable look like?
No, that was just like, I didn't understand. That's like corporatist talk.
Okay, let's make it very practical. So,
Yes.
So in terms of the problem in South Africa that we need to get to is we need to get a more decentralized political system. That's the goal that we want to achieve. And the way we see that happening is it's a very big country, it's a very diverse country, and the different nations that live there should be able to govern themselves.
So regional autonomy is, in 2 words, what you see as the end use here.
It could be regional autonomy, yes. There are other forms of self-governance, whether it's a federation, whether it's cultural autonomy like they have in countries like Estonia and Finland and so forth.
And what do you think would be the South African government's strongest argument in response to federalizing the system and decentralizing
They
it?
would say, I think in terms of international law, they would frame it as they have territorial autonomy over South Africa and they decide. They would then argue that South Africa is a democracy and they are the people. The state represents the people, and what they decide is what the people want.
Those would all be true arguments.
Well, except for what is not considered is South Africa is very far from homogenous. It's something that's the equivalent of saying that what the European Union decides is what the Hungarians want, because South Africa is big and diverse and it's inhabited.
Or it's like saying what the country wants in representing Donald Trump might not necessarily be what some components of the Chaz want in Seattle.
Well, that's interesting that you say regional autonomy is kind of what's the desired end goal here. My understanding, South Africa being a very interesting country, is doesn't it have 3 capitals that was meant to kind of give it this regional autonomous sort of structure to its government? And if that's the case, how did it become centralized if in its original outlay it's literally got 3 capitals for 3 different regions?
Yeah, so the 3 capitals are the seats of the executive branch, which is Pretoria, the legislative branch, which is Cape Town, and the judicial branch, which is Bloemfontein, with the Free State. Theoretically, you could read the South African Constitution as providing for a decentralized system. Here's one of the catches, and again, one of the important lessons for America and for the rest of the world, is that especially when you deal with a country that is as diverse as South Africa, people have completely different outlooks on matters of constitutionalism and how to interpret very basic phrases in the South African Constitution. So when the Constitution says the government can expropriate your property when it's in public interest, someone has to interpret that and say, when is it in public interest for the government to do that? And the classical Western line would be something like, there's a highway to be built and there's a house in the middle. They're not going to do this with a highway. Or there's a war and they need to build a military base or something like that. But the South African line, because it's a race nationalist socialist government, their line would be, it's not in public interest for white people to own property or to own as much property as they do. And so in the name of public interest, that's how we interpret the Constitution. Therefore, we're going to do that.
Well,
is there compensation when people's property is taken away?
So to date, there has been, and it's an interesting fact, there was a process of land claims in South Africa as a result of peoples or communities who've had land dispossessed from them in the past, and that has been settled. Like almost all of those cases have been settled already. But what happened then was the vast majority, and I mean like more than 90% of the people who filed such claims actually said they don't really want the land, they want money. So they would prefer financial compensation. And the reason why that's a big deal is because those in power in South Africa, they don't like that outcome because they want 80% of land to be owned by black people, But then the black people who are filing the land claims actually say, actually, I don't want the land, I want the money. And so this new process, that's why they signed this new expropriation bill, which says that they want the power to be able to take people's stuff without compensation. Again, when it's in the public interest, and they determine when it's public interest.
That is remarkable. That actually the compensation is what they've got to get rid of to make sure there's an actual transmitting of the real property interest.
Well, because I mean, it's farmland too, right?
What do you grow on it? Like, tell us a little bit about the land itself. Like, how should Americans think about this geography?
South Africa again is very big, and also sort of from a climate perspective. So South Africa is big on wheat, corn is big on. Where I grew up was a more subtropical area where people farm with bananas and avocados, and there's cattle. So there's farming in everything in South Africa, and it's all over the country.
I'm so excited when we get our Merriweather Farms shipments in. You get a beautiful piece of ribeye. Look at that marbling. Now, I take it out of the package, let it get down to room temperature. All I've got on here is a little salt, a little pepper, and then a little avocado oil. And then I've had my pan preheating with a little oil.
Head to merriweatherfarms.com and enter promo code MattG for 15% off your first order.
Well, that's what makes it so this situation, as you stated, because it's not just any land, it's farmland, right? And if you have this land claims process in place, and these people come and say, yeah, I claimed that land, but I'm just claiming it so I could actually sell it off for the cash that I get from it, right? And then who does that farmland go to at the end, right? And it's not going back to the farmer. It's not going to the person who's making the claim.
Yeah, when they take it, is it still productive?
Yeah.
I wonder when they take the land, are they still growing weed and feeding people?
Actually, the South African government have said, according to their own statistics, more than 90% of those farms fail. So that's their own program. And then what happens is the commercial farms become subsistence farms, and subsistence farms become squatter camps. And so even though, according to their own statistics, more than 90% fail, the response...
Is that the goal, to turn productive, beautiful farms into squatter camps?
That's what it seems like. I think they don't care about that. But their response to that is, actually, we should just try this policy a little bit harder. We should make it a bit more radical and sort of double down on the policy that has resulted in this and be more aggressive. And then we're going to reach the utopia someday, just wait.
Well, you don't have to look that far to see where that went. I mean, Zimbabwe, or, as Rhodesia, as we say Rhodesia, don't we?
Just like we say Judea and Samaria.
That's right. So just look at Rhodesia. It was the breadbasket of Africa at its time. And then as soon as Mugabe comes in and this revolution happens, it's now the hyperinflation through the roof, and the land is not productive. How you don't even need to go that far to see where that road takes you, and somehow these people that are running South Africa see it fit to do it to themselves.
So we've gone over the diagnosis of what's happening. I think Ernst has laid out the trajectory. He has identified where you want to go, which is more of a federalist type system, less centralized power. Maybe it's autonomous republics or semi-autonomous republics. Let's spend some time now on the strategy to get there, because you've pointed out you can't vote your way to this outcome.
Yes.
So how are you going to get there?
So I need to re-emphasize that we need to get there ourselves. I'm not here in America to ask America to make that happen, or people in America.
We couldn't anyway. We couldn't beat goat herders in Afghanistan. Yeah. So I don't think I wouldn't pick us, honestly.
Yeah. So I think one of our biggest challenges currently is that as Afrikaners, we are spread out all over the country. So we're sort of a minority everywhere, even though 2.7 million people are a lot of people. But if you're spread out over a territory twice the size of Texas, it makes it quite difficult. So we need to, and we are doing that, is sort of identify certain areas where we become a majority, where we create some de facto realities, through self-governance. And so that is something that we need to work on.
Yeah, it worked for the Somalis in Minnesota.
Basically.
Yeah. I mean,
create your own ethnic blocks, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, then you get representation. You get to kind of seize some mayoral posts, maybe. And so you go full Minnesota Somali. Do you think there's an interest in Afrikaners to have that type of concentration?
Yes. Yeah, it's partly happening more in the west of the country. So there's a lot of talk recently about Western Cape independence, which is the area where Cape Town is settled. It's sort of different than the rest of the country. And some surveys.
You guys are trying to not look like white people, and you went to the beach. I mean, I don't know. I don't. You picked the one place you were going to concentrate, and it was the most beautiful part of the country.
No, but then there's the Orania movement up north in the Northern Cape, which is sort of a semi-desert area. It's 30% of the territory of the country, but it's 2% of the population that live there. So it's sort of the west of the country is not nearly as inhabited as the east. Sort of the better climate is on the east. But there's this movement to build sort of an autonomous community in the north, in the Northern Cape.
Go like Arizona Mormon.
Yeah.
They went out to Utah and Arizona because it was the last place the army wouldn't chase them.
Yeah.
And then they concentrated power, and now they basically run
to Utah.
Yeah. Okay, so there's the Utah strategy.
Wow.
And what do you think the timeline is, Ernst, for trying to pull together people for that kind of vision?
We need to do that quicker. But I should stress that when we talk about something like this, we cannot say that therefore it's acceptable for the government to be doing what it is doing currently. So we need to sort of fight this on two levels. We need to fight these very destructive policies that are applicable everywhere in the country. And I think America can do a lot in helping with that. So, for example, with the tariffs, to say that there are certain preconditions that should be set to trade agreements with the South African government, such as that property rights have to be protected, that the race laws should be done away with. So
will that work? Like, will the elites that run the government ultimately choose the GDP of South Africa over their racist impulses?
No, they wouldn't.
Lovely.
But they are very desperate for money because it's sort of a house of cards in South Africa at the moment with the social grant system. So if you add up the social grants payouts with government salaries, with government debt, it's already more than 80% of government expenditures. And that's just growing. So they can't fund this project anymore. And so they're very desperate for money. And we saw that
and they rely on U.S. trade to fill the coffers.
Especially U.S. trade.
So you think that's a real leverage point? We're getting somewhere. That's the real leverage point.
Yes.
Because Trump would totally do that.
Well, there are some other practical things that I think would be very symbolic, I think also for America. South Africa is in a way DEI capital of the world. We call it BEE, what you call DEI. BEE is Black Economic Empowerment, but it's not empowerment at all. It's just socialist policies. And so one thing that the American government could do through this process of ethically sourced goods, like, not importing stuff that was built through child labor and so forth, to say, but products that have been produced as a result of this policy is not ethical. And so we're going to exempt companies that don't participate in that process from tariffs. Something like that would have a massive impact in South Africa. And I think it's a practical thing.
Well, it would certainly have a massive impact in any autonomous republic that then could disclaim those activities.
Well, I mean, you get into that territory, but I mean, what else can we do to help? I think that there is some point to that, like, oh, if this was made with DEI, we're not importing it, or if this wasn't made with DEI, it'll skip the tariff, right? Something like that. I mean, aside from, like I said, invading Pretoria,
that is values-based trade, right?
Yes.
And there is a component of our trade paradigm that is getting to like more interest-based and less values-based. But I think you can make a real argument that it's interest-based trade policy as well because of what you mentioned earlier about BRICS. I think that's a huge component of all this. South Africa really moving toward Russia and China and an alternate economic system. And if they're going to do that, I think there have to be some consequences. I learned in politics early, if you treat your friends and enemies the same way, there's no point in being your friend.
That's right. And President Trump already said he's coming after anybody who's talking about BRICS, right? And so if that's the case, then this is kind of a prime example, right? We don't want this like you said, the last Western outpost in Africa to go down because of all these bad actors now trying to destroy this beautiful community through racist policy.
Other than the United States, what's the most important country to really understand this and share a vision of more autonomized regional power in South Africa?
What do you mean? Do you mean other
Like other country outside, other global entity? Is it, is it Russia? Is it China?
Hungary.
Is it
for
Hungary?
South Africa?
Yeah. Well, who would you want? Like in your corner, you would obviously take the United States as your number one draft pick.
Yeah.
Who would be number two?
Well, it would be the West.
Yeah, but you got to pick a country.
I think for symbolic reasons, the Dutch. I think it's very sad, and obviously this is not applicable to everyone, but everyone in the Netherlands. But it's very sad how the Dutch have sort of abandoned the Afrikaner people, and the Dutch government in particular. But we have very good friends in the Netherlands, and the fact that we descend predominantly from the Dutch, I think the Dutch. I would go as far as say that they have a responsibility, but even if they don't want, if that's a too strong word, I think it would be very appropriate for the Dutch to take a stance at what is happening.
But you're not satisfied or pleased with the trajectory of that right now?
No, I think it's going to happen because of the winds of change happening in Europe in general.
Yeah.
With countries becoming increasingly conservative. I think we're going to get... there's a lot of support from countries like Hungary, which we never expected, and some from countries like England and so forth. But I think it would be important for the Dutch to take a firmer stance about what's happening in South Africa.
Well, Ernst, it has been a thoroughly enjoyable and informative discussion. Vish, did you know all of this already, or have you learned a little along the way too?
I can't wait to visit South Africa because I've been learning so much about it, and I want to see this place for myself. I hear it's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, you should come. Yeah.
Well,
There we go.
when we can stand in solidarity with the Afrikaners, we're not sure if it'd be the safest place for you these days, especially after this podcast. But again, very much appreciate it. We wish you well. If folks want to follow this movement, get involved, where do they go?
Yeah, so they can look us up on social media. I represent a think tank and an advocacy group that is working, that you mentioned. We're working towards a better political system. It's called Lex Libertas, which is Latin for law and freedom. And our website is...
So indigenously African to go with the Latin, by the way. Just quite the chef's kiss.
I don't hate it.
Yeah, so... and our website is org.za, so it's lexlibertas.org.za, and people can follow us there and support us also through the website.
Really a great treatise you have out now that lays out this plan, Reclaiming Freedom, published this month by Lex Libertas, and we enjoyed going through it and really understanding what the path forward is, and we hope it's a productive one.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be on the show.
Thank you. We'll be back next week with another episode of Anchormen.
Want to see more great videos like this? Click on the link below to subscribe to OAN Live and watch Dan Ball's Real America and The Matt Gaetz Show on Dish Channel 212. Tune in, subscribe, and